Good afternoon, and welcome to the Joint General Session of the ISO Board of Governors and WEIM Governing Body. Please note that all audience audio connections will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We will give you instructions on how to ask questions at that time. With that, I'll turn the call over to Roger Holton with the California ISO.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's Roger Collinson. I'm General Counsel, Corporate Secretary, and welcome to the meeting this afternoon. And let me start out with having our roll call, and then we'll move through the agenda. So we'll start in order. Governor Bornstein.
Here.
Chair Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Governor Edo.
Here.
Governor Galitova.
Present.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Chair Leslie.
Present.
Member Prescott.
Here.
Vice Chair Shorey.
Here.
And Member Wagner.
Here.
Thank you, governors and governing body members. We have a full quorum, a full complement of board and governing body members, and we may proceed. Our first agenda item is for, first of all, our chair's welcome. So let's start there, and I'll turn it over to Chair Campbell to start out.
Thanks, Roger, and good afternoon. Welcome to the November 8th Joint General Session of the ISO Board of Governors and the EIM governing body. So typically we have separate general session meetings of the governing body and Board of Governors in addition to the joint meeting. But for the sake of efficiency, all of these meetings have been consolidated into one this go round. Thanks to Chair Leslie and the ISO staff for accommodating this approach. I wanted to highlight that we will be hearing an update from the Western EIM Body of State Regulators Chair, Haley Williamson, who is Chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. She will be joined by Vice Chair Gabriel Aguilera from the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. We're also going to hear an update from the Western EIM's Regional Issues Forum, currently chaired by Josh Walter from Seattle City Light. Thank you for attending today's meeting.
Thank you, Andy. And Chair Leslie.
Thank you, Chair Campbell, for that comprehensive overview. I'd just like to add, we'll also be discussing the policy initiatives briefing and what we have to look forward to and what is currently under a review. And I just want to thank the CAISO staff for their hard work, because I'm not sure we say that enough. I think our appreciation for what you're doing and building these new markets and your success at FERC, congratulations on doing a really good job. And thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
That's it, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Leslie. Also, as part of agenda item number 1, we have an opportunity for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. As we walk through the agenda, there will be an opportunity for those particular items. But if there is any public comment for items not on the agenda, this is your opportunity. So, operator, if you could instruct folks on how to enter the comment queue, and we can see if we have any. Adrian?
Yes. Sorry about that. If you would like to ask a question, please press #2 on your phone to be placed in the queue. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted. Please then state your name, organization, and question. If your question has been answered before your turn, pressing #2 a second time will take you out of the queue. All right. We have one question.
I'm not seeing anything. Did you say we have a question or a comment?
Yes. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Hi, this is Stacy Bernard. I just had a note that the host asked me to unmute, but I have no questions for the board.
Oh, that was that was on me.
No worries.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, everyone. We can go to agenda item number 2, which is to me, and that's for the joint general session minutes, seeking approval of the joint general session minutes from September 20th, 2023. So I need a motion for that approval and from the governing body or board members.
So moved, Anita.
Second,
Thank you.
Brent.
Thank you. Kind of fumbled through that. So let's go ahead and take the vote. And the vote on that is we'll go in alphabetical order. Governor Borenstein.
Aye.
Governor Chair Campbell.
Yes.
Member Decker.
Yes.
Governor Edo.
Aye.
Governor Galitova.
Aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Chair Leslie. Chair Leslie, you on mute maybe?
Aye.
Member Prescott.
Aye.
Vice Chair Shorey.
Aye.
And Member Wagner.
Aye.
Thank you, governors and governing body members. The motion passes, and we can move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 3, is our CEO report. And let me turn it over to you, Elliot.
Thanks, Roger. Chair Leslie and Chair Campbell and members of the ISO Board of Governors and governing body members, it's wonderful to see you all and to our stakeholders assembled today. Hard to believe we're getting close to the end of what I think has been a super challenging and very productive 2023. Have a number of items to report out to you today from my CEO report. Starting with the annular solar eclipse. I think as many of you know, back on October 14th, a good fraction of the Western United States experienced an annular solar eclipse. I'm pleased to report that after quite a bit of careful planning and significant coordination with members of the WEIM and the RC and utilities across the West, we were able to work through that eclipse with very stable grid operations and restoring right back to normal operations right at the conclusion of the event at about 11:05 on that Saturday. I think it was really I think certainly the CAISO gets a chance to sort of practice this kind of ramping activity just about every day. But this was a little bit more of an extreme event with some significant ramping. And it was just nice to see that the system performed very well and that coordination and communication with our partners and entities across the West, I think was really contributed to, I think, a successful management of the event. We are going to be producing a full report out on the post-eclipse analysis later in December. And I look forward to sharing that with folks and any learnings from the event. I next want to turn to transmission service and market scheduling priorities. Back on October 30th, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission did issue an order approving the ISO's transmission service and market scheduling priorities phase 1 tariff modifications, I think otherwise known as our wheel-through proposal. This, of course, proposal was approved by the ISO Board of Governors back on February 1st, 2023, and instituting a new process for establishing wheeling through priorities across the ISO system that will go into effect in June of 2024. And of course, I think building on bedrock open access principles and modeled significantly after the practices of other Western partners. And so we're now moving with the decision at FERC and that outcome moving into implementation and reaching out to folks and just continuing that commitment to certainly that balance between native load obligations and making sure that there is inventory across the transmission system. You know, as October closed out and we were able to, I think, sort of formally see the summer of 2023 really now in the rearview mirror. I think, you know, it was another, in many ways, challenging summer. I think a successful summer in many ways. I think a lot of coordination. I think the energy imbalance market really proved its value. All of the different tools available to us helped us work through some challenging conditions back in July and some additional challenging conditions for many across the West. And I really do see that as in many ways a success story. But I wanted to also acknowledge that we've had some feedback through our EIM governing body members, through various forums, that there are still folks that want to make sure that they have maximum clarity and understanding about the tagging and scheduling priority practices across the ISO, both this summer and generically, and also just make sure that they have a good understanding of our load management practices within the balancing authority. I did want to say, just by starting, certainly all of us here at the CAISO, we do feel strongly that we have been very transparent and I think very diligent in adhering to our scheduling and tagging policies, including those associated with low priority exports and also priority wheel throughs across the CAISO system. And I think we've also worked very hard to promote maximum liquidity across the West to the energy market while managing load within our balancing authority and ensuring that California load serving entities have access to the resource adequacy capacity that they've contracted with. But I also recognize that, we're all woven together. We all need to have a very clear understanding of the rules and the practices. And I have asked Joanne Serena and Anna McKenna to create additional opportunities here in the short term to bring stakeholders together to review those scheduling and tagging practices and also our load management procedures inside the balancing authority. And to answer any residual questions either coming out of summer 2023 or more broadly. And we'll also be developing some written materials and some FAQs with really clear and concise explanations of how all these different pieces work together and disseminating those to our market partners and to policymakers and decision makers across the West. So we'll get moving on that quickly, and just wanted to acknowledge the importance of all of us, having that shared understanding and appreciate the feedback loop there. So we'll stay on that and continue to make positive progress together. I'd like to turn my attention next to interconnection process enhancements, phase 2. This continues to be a major initiative for us here at the California ISO, building on the general principles and design as outlined in our memorandum of understanding with the state agencies, and just making sure that there is a really good tight synchronization between power and transmission planning and interconnection queuing and procurement. We've made some real progress with the working group of just fantastic level of participation, folks throughout industry on this very, very timely and important topic. We've, earlier back on September 21st, we published the phase 2 straw proposal, which suggests a set of scoring and ranking criteria for different projects to be able to move forward into the study process. We've also added another feature of potential auction, which will allow us to further determine which projects can move into the study process and kind of ration those scarce studying and analytical resources. Also recognizing, wanting to make sure that we're sensitive to costs and minimizing any untoward impacts on those in the queue. Another element that we're exploring is for projects that are currently in the ISO's interconnection queue. We're proposing a one-time opportunity for interconnection customers to withdraw projects from the queue and receive over time any unused portion of their interconnection financial security postings. This is another topic that's subject to a lot of good dialogue, a lot of good feedback. Really appreciated everybody leaning in to give us their feedback on that, and we're going to continue to make progress. Of course, at the same time that our that our interconnection process enhancement initiative has been underway, FERC did issue Order 2023 earlier this year. We have been working as well on our compliance filing for 2023 and intend to get that filed as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. I will note that we were originally on track to file that compliance filing in December. Recently, FERC extended the compliance filing for Order 2023 out to next April. So we'll likely be, matching that timetable. But there is a lot of, I think, positive policy in that docket, and I think that we're going to be building upon that. And our next steps will be we're going to be issuing the next iteration of the proposal. We'll be going out to stakeholders here in the next few weeks, which I think will also reflect the new requirements associated with the FERC order continuing to work with stakeholders to refine the proposal and then bringing that back to the board for approval likely in March of next year, given the change in the filing timeline at the commission. Lots more work to be done here, but really encouraged with the level of engagement and progress on this topic, and really looking forward to making some really significantly foundational changes so that we can continue to efficiently onboard the significant amounts of new capacity that California and the West is going to need in the years ahead. I also wanted to note, I think all of us, certainly within California, across the West, have been very, very focused on resource adequacy, developing our programs, refining our policies, making sure that we're keeping up with the changing resource mix, harmonizing the different elements of the programs, integrated resource planning, RA procurement, understanding the interplay between the California Resource Adequacy Program and the emerging Western Resource Adequacy Program of entities outside of California. And so we have also, with all of the different variables, brought together a stakeholder working group just to continue taking a good look at our resource adequacy program and seeing if there's any elements that we need to adjust or enhance given all the changes that are in place both within the state and out of California. One thing we know is we want to be able to do just a really good job of providing a very consistent, transparent, and timely information on the sufficiency of the resource adequacy fleet within the ISO footprint, particularly with the changing resource mix. So we're bringing some additional analytic resources to the table there. We also want to make sure, take a look at our procurement and maintenance investment incentives to make sure that they are sending the strongest necessary signals and also aligned with state and other RA programs. So we've been very fortunate to have brought in Jeff McDonald, who actually, some of you may know Jeff. He worked for a number of years, actually more than a decade, at the ISO's Department of Market Monitoring, most recently at ISO New England's Internal Market Monitoring Unit. He's come in to facilitate that working group, and we're just excited to continue building on, I think, what's been significant progress and success in the resource adequacy sector here in California in the last few years and continue to refine and sharpen our program. Just a couple other items. I must admit, it does give me, I'm just going to have to say it, I would say great joy to report that for the first time in 25 years, the ISO is not going to have any reliability must-run contracts to start 2024. Some of you are probably familiar with my passion to make RMR contracts a thing of the past. We were really pleased to see that two of the remaining facilities, the Oakland Power Company, LLC Oakland Units 1 and 3, and Greenleaf 2 Cogen were able to secure RA contracts moving into, I think, the first into 2020. I think Greenleaf goes through 2024. And the Oakland units through 2025. So wonderful to have access to the dispatchable capacity there without the need for RMR contracts. I think that's just another reflection of ongoing progress here in our partnerships across the state on resource adequacy coordination. And just, of course, wanted to note that just continuing to be extremely focused on progress within our extended day ahead market. We were very encouraged by the very, very significant and substantive round of comments that we received on our tariff filing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We took a lot of time to really sink into those comments, really understand them. I think we provided a very robust response that we resubmitted back on October 11th, hoping for a ruling from the Commission no later than December 21st of this year so that we can keep our momentum. And just really, I think this is very encouraging progress. I think the issues that were identified all have really good tangible solutions. I feel like there's a lot of goodwill, and we're just excited, hopefully, to get a solid ruling from the Commission and really head straight into 2024, rolling up our sleeves towards implementation progress. And a final note, and obviously of special interest to our members of the WEIM governing body, just absolutely outstanding quarter of WEIM benefits. The third quarter of 2023 benefits were published back on October 31st. The quarter Q3 benefits at $462.05 million which means that the WEIM is now closing in on $5 billion in cumulative benefits, which really just goes straight to the bottom line and help electricity consumers save money during these challenging times. I will also note, though, and this is something that was really borne out this summer, I know particularly working through both July and in August, watching the WEIM this summer work to just so efficiently cycle energy around the Western interconnection during some very, very challenging days just made an enormous contribution to reliability and resilience in the summer of 2023. And I think we've seen that now that just really directly these last couple of summers. And so I think while we appropriately focus on those tangible production cost savings, which I think are very important to all of our member utilities who are focused on affordability, the reliability benefits, I think, also just continue to grow and get increasingly important, particularly with the kind of variability and volatility that we're seeing year on year, record smashing temperatures and loads, and just the ability to leverage the transmission footprint and resource diversity that exists across approximately 80% of the Western United States. So just wanted to call that out. And thanks to everybody who contributed to what I think was a very successful summer. And I will just reiterate one more time our commitment to continued progress and partnership with our many stakeholders and partners across the West. So that will conclude my report for today, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Elliot. I see Mary has her hand raised, and so we'll start there. Mary?
Clapping for the reliability must run. I was trying to double down on that good news.
Well, now we got not only the virtual clap, but we got to hear you say it too. So that's even
Bless
better.
You. Yes.
Right. Rob, are you clapping or do you have a question?
Neither. I do have a comment. Is that okay?
Okay, comments are good.
Elliot, I'd like to express my appreciation for the acknowledgement of the time to address that there are still some lingering issues from this past summer. You know, the July report was excellent. It was very thorough, very detailed, quite long, and you pointed out a lot of complex issues that transpired and overlap. And sometimes it's hard to unwind some of that. And I know that Joanne and Anna probably have other things they would prefer to do besides going back on this. But I do think it's very helpful, the work they'll be doing to help clarify for everybody so that everybody knows really what transpired and what we can do to make certain that these types of mistakes, of whatever type there were, don't happen again, and everyone feels better about making certain they're on solid footing. So thank you, and thank you to the team that'll help address all this. And I know there's all this other good news, and I do appreciate that this will be addressed and help get it resolved so that everyone truly understands what's happened.
Absolutely. Thank you. We look forward to the next steps.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Any other comments or questions or clapping for Elliot? Seeing none. Give it another sec. Nope, nothing popping up. So we can move on to agenda item number 4, which is our body of state regulators update. Body of state regulators update. And we have the boss for chair, Haley Williamson. Haley?
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. First, starting off with good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Kanzioka, members of the Western EIM governing body, Chair Leslie, Vice Chair Shorey, and members of the CAISO Board of Governors. For those I have not yet met, I'm Haley Williamson. I'm the chair of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Body of State Regulators, more conveniently known as the BOSSR. I'm also chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. This is my first meeting serving as the new chair of the BOSSR, so it's a pleasure to be with all of you today and give you this update. For those of you who may not be aware of the EIM BOSSR and our role in the EIM, The BOSSER was established in September 2015 as part of the governance proposal adopted by the California ISO Board of Governors to address the regional nature of the energy imbalance market. The BOSSER is comprised of one commissioner from each of the state utility commissions in which a regulated load-serving utility participates or plans to participate in the CAISO's EIM or future EDAM markets. The BOSSER provides a forum for state commissioners to select a voting member of the EIM governing body nominating committee, learn about and discuss the EIM and EDAM markets, and express a common position in both the stakeholder processes or directly to the Western EIM governing body. The BOSSER's new vice chair is also on today, Commissioner Aguilera of New Mexico. Commissioner Aguilera, if you're able, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair Williamson. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, my name is Gabriel Aguilera from the New Mexico Commission. I've been a follower of CAISO and EIM and the BOSSER from my previous life at FERC, and so I'm very much looking forward to continuing to work on very similar difficult issues from the BOSSER's perspective. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gabriel. And funny aside, I asked Gabriel once how to pronounce his last name, and he said, just like Christina's. So Aguilera, in case anyone...
Any relation though?
Well, we'll have to ask Gabriel.
Right.
No relation.
Thank you. As the chair and vice chair of the BOSSER, we look forward to leading the BOSSER on important issues that the state commissions are facing in both the EIM and EDAM markets and sharing these perspectives. I'd like to also take this opportunity to very much thank Chair LeVar of the Utah Public Service Commission for being such a great leader of the BOSSER for the last few years. We're really lucky that he's staying on in the BOSSER and will continue to participate as we engage in the regional EIM and EDAM efforts. It's been a couple months since the BOSSER has provided an update to the EIM governing body and also to the ISO Board of Governors. The BOSSER last provided commentary to you all at the Joint Board of Governors and Governing Body meeting back in February, where we shared our advice sent to the EIM governing body on the EDAM policy initiative and governance. For recent activity, the BOSSER held its in-person meeting last month in conjunction with CREPSI and WEIM, as well as other state committees working on various electricity matters in the West. We met in Seattle, and it was really nice to see as many of the people as we did in person. At our meeting, we announced the BOSSER's new leadership and also the approval of the BOSSER's 2024 business plan and budget. We also received a 2023 EIM markets benefit update from ISO management. Thank you so much for that. It was a successful meeting, and we look forward to convening again in the spring. At our monthly meetings, the BOSSER continues to be briefed on the various pre-initiative activities that are underway at the CAISO. We are currently working to understand the issues with current market designs that the GHG Coordination Working Group and the Price Formation Enhancement Working Group are working through. As these working groups seek to define the issues, the BOSSER will continue to monitor their early stage developments and provide feedback when the BOSSER deems necessary. Additionally, this summer, the BOSSER and the Western Power Pool's Western Resource Adequacy Program, or WRAP, Committee of State Representatives, better known as the COSR, convened in a joint educational session to hear from California ISO management and the Western Power Pool on the interoperability of WRAP and EDAM. As the ISO's RA working group initiates its process, the BOSSER may consider convening the two committees again in the future to understand and share perspectives of the interoperability of both these constructs. Additionally, the BOSSER continues to follow the progress of EDAM, transmission service and market scheduling priorities, and EIM RSC enhancement policy initiatives that I look forward to ISO management updates later in today's meeting, actually. This was a lot of acronyms and a lot of updates, but this concludes my update for today. On behalf of the BOSSER, Vice Chair Aguilera and I, thank you very much for your time, and I'm available to try and answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Vice Chair Aguilera. Is there any comments or questions from the governing body and the board? Rob, you have your hand up?
I do. Thank you, Roger. Chair Williamson and Vice Chair Aguilera, welcome and thank you for being here today. Always appreciate hearing from the BOSSER. Chair Williamson, as you noted, the last 2 years was not an easy one. Number of significant issues were addressed, and the governing body appreciated the boss's input on those items. It helps inform and make good decisions. The next 2 years will probably prove to be not any easier. And under your leadership, we hope that you will bring advice to the governing body in the fashion that will be helpful and guide it in the right direction. So we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And you as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Not seeing any more hands up, so double check. So we can move on to the next time. Thank you, Haley. Appreciate your time. Agenda item number 5 is our update on our Regional Issues Forum. And for that, we have the Regional Issue Forum Chair, Josh Walter. Josh?
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, members of the governing body and Board of Governors. My name is Josh Walter. I am the chair of the Regional Issues Forum and am a liaison for the EIM entity sector working for Seattle City Light. I'm here to give a brief update on RIF related issues, largely updating you all on the upcoming meeting the RIF is holding on the afternoon of December 11th, prior to the next, I believe it's a joint meeting, certainly before the next governing body meeting on December 12th. The topics included in our next meeting are going to include a panel on transmission and transfer capabilities in the market. We then will move into publicly finalizing and coalescing around a plan surrounding the decision from the GRC to hold a roundtable discussion associated with the CAISO policy roadmap. And then finally, we are planning on discussing the RIF's engagement practices with the governing body and exploring new ways of value add the RIF may bring in the governing body's evaluative and decision-making processes. So that is kind of the core components associated with the meeting being held on the 11th. A couple other items that the RIF liaison group is currently working on. We're working on creating a more definitive meeting schedule for the 2024 calendar year, as well as having some early conversations amongst the liaison members associated with potential operating guideline amendments. It's from time to time the RIF membership does a review of the operating guidelines and post conclusion of the GRC. I think we believe it's kind of ripe to re-review and see if there's any additions, subtractions, or augmentations that we may need to do within our operating guidelines. So that's really the bulk of the items and issues that the RIF has been discussing, and I'm happy to take any questions from there.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions or comments for Josh? Andy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. Just Josh, just a quick thank you for the work the RIF is doing and for providing that update. Appreciate it very much. Look forward to the December meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions or no more hands up. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate your time today. And we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is our decision on billing payment and credit enhancements phase 1. And this is an item that Dan Schunkweiler from the legal department, he's Assistant General Counsel, has been working on very closely. And I will turn it over to Dan for the management presentation. Dan?
Good afternoon, everyone. this initiative focuses on the weekly billing and payment process for market participants, which clears more than $10 billion each year. Management's proposing to enhance the tools that are available to the ISO when a market participant that owes money on an invoice to the rest of the market files for bankruptcy or otherwise fails to pay. These events happen roughly once a year, and they pose a risk to every other market participant, because if the ISO can't collect from the defaulting participant, the others would share the loss. And even if the ISO does collect eventually, a delay in collection can result in a delay of part of the payment to the rest of the market, which would also be a negative outcome. Now, not every market participant bankruptcy or other default results in a loss to the market. Despite regular defaults and bankruptcies over the years, the ISO has made every payment to the market in full and on time going back to mid-2001. This strong payment history is due to some good fortune and also to a couple of tools, particularly the credit program, in which every market participant their estimated liability is calculated and they post collateral to cover their estimated liabilities. But all tools, and even that one, have gaps. Just to cite one example, even if the ISO is holding enough collateral to pay a debt, that's not a guarantee of timely payment, because the ISO can need bankruptcy court permission to use collateral, which can cause a substantial delay. So, sorry, can we go to slide 3? I just talked through one more. Thank you. So management reviewed these rules to look for improvements and lessons learned after events in our market. There was a bankruptcy by one participant in 2021 and a default by another in 2022, and also some widely publicized events in other markets, especially ERCOT in 2021. And as a result of this review, management is proposing enhancements to reduce the risk to the market. And the set of proposals, there are several of them, they fall in two general categories. First is to prevent a loss from occurring. These are tools so that the ISO is stronger positioned between the first event, the default or the bankruptcy, and the need to spread a loss to the market and trying to prevent a default from becoming a loss. The second category is, if a loss does have to occur, we want to reduce the burden to the market, including the administrative burden, and make this happen in the least obtrusive way possible. So let's go ahead to the next slide. Within the first category of preventing losses, one proposal concerns a situation where a market participant has more than one agreement with the ISO that governs billing and payment. Several entities, for example, have both a scheduling coordinator agreement and a CRR entity agreement. If one of these entities were to file for bankruptcy, there could be arguments about which amounts due or receivable are governed by which agreement, and worse, an opportunity to pick and choose between the agreements. That is, for the bankrupt debtor to reject an agreement where they owe money to the market but keep the agreement that's got a favorable financial position. All of this, both the litigation and maybe negative outcomes, would be to the possible detriment of the market. Now, this hasn't happened, but we want to avoid the possibility, so we're proposing tariff rules that would designate, in this situation where there are multiple agreements that control billing and payment, which one would control. And this is a tariff amendment only, and it would not require changes to the contracts. Second, has to do with minimum capitalization. FERC regulations require all ISOs and RTOs to have minimum capitalization requirements for the participants who engage directly in billing and payment. The general rule across the board is that such participants must have $10 million in total assets or $1 million in tangible net worth as a minimum. For us, in some other RTOs, there's a second rule to enable smaller entities to participate, even if they don't meet this requirement. And that requirement is that they must post $500,000 cash or other credit support. And this posting is separate from and in addition to any collateral they have to post based on their market activity. It's just designed, it's extra assurance of the ability to pay on a par with the other participants. The ISO currently has a rule that allows entities that use this rule to adjust their posting lower to only $100,000 if they go through 6 months of low level of market activity. We're proposing to abolish that exception. This proposal is based on our experience and with the rule and the fact that we're an outlier on the low end. The research shows that all other RTOs require that any market participants who participate in financial trades, meaning CRRs or virtual bidding, have to post a minimum of $500,000 under all circumstances or meet the general capitalization requirement. So our proposal is to eliminate this $100,000 exception and so that we match the other RTOs and assure that all market participants either meet the general requirement or post $500,000 in credit support. We go to the next slide. The second category involves, of proposals generally, involves a situation where a loss does occur, and we want to make sure that, and it has to be allocated to the market, and we want to ensure that that loss is allocated in the right way and at the lowest cost to everyone. The first set of adjustments have to do with the ISO's reserve accounts. These have also been helpful tools in avoiding losses over the years, but they have limits. The balance currently is less than $2 million. The tariff specifies that the use of these accounts is mandatory whenever the ISO doesn't receive payment, and that rule has been good, but we can envision a circumstance where there's a payment default larger than that, and there are additional defaults expected. And in that limited situation, when the reserve accounts aren't sufficient to fully cover a loss for the week, we propose to amend the tariff to allow the ISO discretionary use of those reserve accounts with the idea of using them strategically so that they would avoid defaults and reduce the overall complexity of the situation. That's point one. Number two has to do with the rules about allocating default losses. At the beginning of every financial quarter, the ISO, according to the tariff and a tariff formula, circulates new percentages for allocating any default losses that may occur during that quarter. And these percentages are calculated based on market activity and payment activity in the recent past. We will have two tweaks or proposed tweaks to those rules. One would slightly adjust the rule about which percentages are to be used in which circumstances to avoid any possibility that after one market participant files for bankruptcy, any new market participants that join after that point could be allocated even the smallest percentage of later losses on later recalculations. An unlikely scenario, but one we think the market ought to, after a period of financial stress, ought to be able to assure new participants that they won't share in it. There is also a tweak to use the most current possible data available in these calculations of the percentages. Third point is about what we call separate invoicing. Generally speaking, and everything I've talked about assumes that any losses would be pooled. The ISO generally doesn't match up buyers and sellers. All the money comes in on a Tuesday and goes out to all the market participants, and if anybody didn't pay, the losses would be spread to everybody. There are a few situations where that shouldn't be the rule, though. One of them has to do with very unusual proceedings where FERC, requires us to recalculate old markets. In those situations, the losses ought to go to the participants in the old market, and that's through something called a separate invoicing. We want to use that in two more situations to make sure losses are allocated to the right participants and that current market participants aren't allocated losses they shouldn't be. One has to do with late payment penalties. If a market participant were to default, not go bankrupt, but default and begin not paying, it could rack up a large number of late payment penalties. We want any defaults on those late payment penalties, if that were to occur, to be allocated to the penalty reserve account and not to the market generally. Something similar with respect to black start services. Black start services are subject to and governed by separate agreements between the black start service provider, the transmission owner, and the ISO. And these agreements contemplate that the payments are essentially bilateral between the parties in interest. If for some reason the transmission owner were to default, that default should go entirely to the black start service provider and would give them certain rights under the agreement. And so the proposed tariff change is to make sure we're implementing that agreement, that the tariff aligns with the agreement. Finally, again, another unusual situation, but occasionally requires the ISO to recalculate old trading days past the 2-year payment cycle. And we had a proceeding like that not too long ago that was resolved at FERC that involved trading days back to 2004. We're proposing a rule that when that happens, the ISO ought to be able to write off a small amount of losses, we're talking about up to $2,000, and pay the market participants using the CAISO reserve account. And the reason for that is in market adjustments, we're talking about situations that are long ago. Some of the market participants may have gone out of business, and they can be difficult to collect from, and some of these invoices can be very small, like $1. And the collection efforts also use up market participant funds, your GMC, and so there's better ways, more efficient ways to handle that for the benefit of the market. So that's proposal 4. Go to the next slide, please. One last substantive change. The tariff currently requires that all payments in this system be made by ACH or Fedwire. There are new payment systems being developed, including FedNow. Sorry, that's what the slide ought to say. And others. And the ISO would like flexibility to authorize use of these payments if we study them and decide they're appropriate and if market participants want to use them. So rather than having ACH and Fedwire hardwired into the tariff, we would propose to change the tariff to say that payment may be made by any means of electronic payment that is authorized in a business practice manual. And that would allow Brian's group to keep up with the ongoing changes in the payment systems. Next slide. Through this review, we've encountered a number of additional, what I call non-substantive corrections, meaning they're consistent with current policy and longstanding practice. These are changes that would otherwise go into a bucket filing, but they are listed in the memo, and they are listed here. They have to do with the rules for replenishing reserve accounts, clarifying how funds will be distributed if there is an uncollected debt and the ISO later collects on it, using the CAISO reserve account for small clearing imbalances, clarifying the definition of settlement statements and the basis of billing and payment. Also some terminology changes and clarification that has no substantive impact, including an old change about monthly settlement. Next slide, please. There's been stakeholder engagement on this. We published a paper, had an hour-and-a-half call with around 50 stakeholder representatives. The stakeholders asked questions during that call and submitted comments on an issue that's not before you today. It was what was an issue paper then that's more complex, but we will resume consideration of into early 2024. But there were no comments on these phase 1 proposals and no objections. Slide, please. this is my conclusion. I'd say, but unless there are questions, management's recommending the approval of these changes in order to benefit the market, in order to collect more easily when that's necessary, reduce the effects of a default loss, make sure it's allocated to the right parties, and to authorize the use of new payment systems.
Okay, thank you, Dan. At this point, let me ask the governing body and the board if they have any questions or comments. And I see already John Prescott has his hand up. John?
Okay, thanks, Roger, and thanks, Dan, for that presentation. So this is a question about the reserve accounts that you've referenced in this presentation and how some of these rules will impact those accounts. So the question is, how are these accounts funded today? What's the source of those accounts? And I'm assuming this won't make any changes to how they're funded. Do you have any comments on that?
Thank you, John. Good question. I'd give you a very high overview and then turn it over to Ryan Segazio if he's here for the details. But there are two reserve accounts. One is called the penalty reserve account. It's a smaller account, but that is where the ISO holds payments that it receives from market participants who have, these are administered under the tariff, but these participants have either paid late or posted collateral late, and they get a small penalty, and that's where those funds go. The general reserve account is where money's been placed over the years, and it's grown with interest, that the ISO receives related to the market that doesn't belong to the corporation and that has no owner. These are, for example, little bits of interest long ago that were held, on funds that were held overnight and then returned, but they're held in the pooled account and there's interest, and so for over 20 years, those funds have grown. Is Ryan on the call and available? He may be able to speak to this in more detail.
Yeah, Ryan, is there any more detail?
No, I think that covers it. There's a variety of little tariff provisions that allow at times amounts to be deposited in the reserve accounts, but there is nothing in the rate structure where there's automatic deposits going in there. But Dan explained that fine.
Thanks, Ryan.
And John, none of this will change.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Andy, you have your hand up.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. I have two questions. First, these seem like very sensible, practical reforms. I think one question, you mentioned there have been defaults over time. Have those generally, to what degree have those been kind of due to sort of external factors impacting those entities versus actually things that occurred in an ISO market?
Thank you, Andy. Good question. I see every time there's an event like this, we learn a little bit about what happened with the market participant and why that happened. And my sense is the great majority of these defaults or losses happen due to external circumstances. There's some other shock on the market participant. The most public example was PG&E's 2019 bankruptcy after the fire issues. But there, maybe 4 or 5 of the 20 have some intersection with events that happened in the ISO's market during that time. So that's my general sense.
Great. Thanks. Then my second question, you mentioned ERCOT. There were a number of bankruptcies that occurred due to the winter storm Uri there. I guess what could, among these kind of reforms or future ones you're considering, like which if any have been informed by a review of the experiences in ERCOT?
I actually don't think any of the details. What ERCOT made us do was look generally, or any of the details proposed here. There's something potentially coming about stop loss positions in a future initiative that has to do with trading activity and prices, more core to the market. But I mentioned ERCOT because that was one of several events that caused us to take a look on several fronts at these issues. And what you received today are proposed changes having to do with the billing and payment process in particular.
Thanks, Dan.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Any other questions from the board or governing body? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we next go to public comment. Adrian, can you check to see if there's anyone that would like in the public that would like to comment?
Yes, not a problem.
So can you
To
instruct?
indicate you wish to speak in the public. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. To indicate you wish to speak in the public comment slide on Zoom, click the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your screen. You'll be placed in the queue. When unmuted, please state your name, organization, and comment.
Give it a moment, but I'm not seeing any comment, no hands raised. Is that correct, Adrian? You don't see any hand raised either?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, with that, I think we are ready for our motion. Let me go ahead and read the motion. Move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEIM governing body approve the proposed enhancements to the rules about billing, payment, and credit as described in the memorandum dated November 1, 2023, and move that the ISO Board of Governors and the WEIM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the change proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Jan.
Jan, and second.
I'll second. Angelina.
Thank you, Angelina. Governor Borenstein, your vote.
Aye.
Governor Campbell, your vote. Chair
Aye.
Campbell. Member Decker, your vote, please.
Aye.
Governor Edo.
Aye.
Governor Galitova.
Aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Chair Leslie.
Aye.
Member Prescott.
Aye.
Vice Chair Shorey.
Aye.
And Member Wagner.
Aye.
Thank you, governors and governing body members. The motion passes. And we may move to the next item. The next item, agenda item number 8, is the briefing on policy initiatives, including EDAM, DAME, wheel-throughs, RSC, GHG coordination, gas resource management, price formation, and resource adequacy. And today, to give us our presentation, introduce the topic, is Anna McKenna, Vice President, Market Design and Analysis. Anna?
Thank you, Roger. I'm just going to take one moment to.
Oh, I have to apologize. Let me back up. I jumped an agenda item. I got so excited.
Right.
I did. So this is actually agenda item 7, and it's the briefing on the WEIM benefits and market update. But everything else I said was true. It's going to Anna. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Roger. And I was just about to ask for that clarification, but with that, let me begin. Well, good afternoon, Chair Leslie, Chair Campbell, Board of Governors, and governing body members. It is a pleasure for me to present to you the third quarter WEIM benefits and market update. Normally, we would provide this update to the governing body in their public meeting. However, given that we only have this joint meeting this month, we have the pleasure of presenting it to both of you. Also, I would normally turn this over to Guillermo Bautista already, but he was unable to join us, so I'll be providing the briefing. But before I continue, I do want to take a moment to thank Guillermo and his team for their continued excellence in providing these reports. Next slide, please. So this year's third quarter saw significant benefits in the amount of $462.05 million. This is the 4th largest quarterly benefit observed since the beginning of the WEIM. There are several factors driving this level of benefits. First, we have the largest set of participating entities forming the WEIM footprint, with Avangrid, El Paso, and WELC joining the WEIM this past April of this year, and further expanding the market footprint and opportunities for more transfers, which is a good source of the benefits. Participation of more EIM entities, of course, enables more economic transactions to transfer across the various participating balancing authority areas, but also benefits the existing entities, not just the new entrants. And that is one of the reasons for the increased benefits. Second, we continue to see robust volumes of transfers among the areas, which reflect economics on the wider area and also the opportunity to exchange between those areas. Third, the economic transfers also result in economic displacement of what we refer to as higher cost energy. So when the transfers happen, what we see is the least cost dispatch coming out of the WEIM, being able to obtain that cheaper energy transfer effectively means that there has been a displacement of more expensive generation in the receiving area, which this then results in benefits overall as well in terms of the cost savings that we see. So what additional note, the largest benefit in the third quarter accrued to PowerX area, and this was driven by the large volume of import transfers coming into PowerX, and these economic transfers displace higher priced internal generation to meet demand within their within the BAA area. And of course, this results in a reflection of higher cost savings for PowerX. Next slide, please. With the 462.05 million in benefits, we now see a total cumulative of benefits of $4.66 billion. And now, as Elliot noted early, we are reaching that $5 billion mark very, very soon. This level of gross economic benefits reflects the value and effectiveness of the WEIM to meet supply and demand at least costs over the footprint. And I would like to mention as well that these benefits that we refer to as economic benefits, they also reflect the ability to transfer in a very efficient and economic manner energy across the larger footprint that provides the ability to actually also produce the most physically feasible schedules that all participants of the WEIM get to benefit from. Next slide, please. Another benefit of the WEIM is the avoided energy curtailments. If we did not have the energy transfers facilitated by the WEIM, some of the renewable generation that exists within the balancing authority areas would have to be curtailed. So the portion in dark that you see on this slide reflects the curtailments in the CAISO system, while the bars and the light blue represent the avoided curtailment due to the presence of the WEIM market. The dotted gray line reflects the cumulative amounts of avoided curtailments over this period of time that we are showing on the slide. As you can see, the avoided curtailments continue to accrue over time, and you can obviously see also changes within the year, depending on the seasonal trend that may be observed, with lower volumes of curtailments in Q3 when demand levels are highest and the solar production can be more naturally absorbed. Next slide, please. One of the main benefits of having the wider market is the ability for the centralized dispatch to find out exactly where the next megawatt of demand needs to be served on the system and what supply is going to serve that demand, and do so in the most economic and least cost dispatch. What we have seen clearly over the years, and especially again during this summer, is that this large array of connectivity that you see on this diagram provides the ability to really provide the various balancing authority areas the opportunity to exchange power in the real-time market in a very expeditious manner. This provides, as I noted, both the economic benefits we talked about, but also the reliability benefits that each balancing authority area gets to experience. As you can imagine, when things get really tight on the system, having the ability to really get to identify what is needed and how you can serve that load, it becomes a very valuable tool. And this is one of the benefits the WEIM footprint as reflected in this diagram provides us. Next slide, please. A significant share of the benefits are from the transfers across the balancing areas that participate in WEIM. Transfers, as I noted earlier, do enable the access to lower costs, and this is how location-based markets can leverage and maximize the opportunities across that wider footprint. The figures on the left illustrate the total flow of transfers among the balancing areas in Q3. The size of the stream flow reflects the relative volume of the WEIM transfers, and the left side is the set of BAAs that were receiving the transfers from, and the right-hand side is the set of the BAAs where the transfers are going to sync. Sorry, Ed. So the left side is where you're seeing the transfers coming from. On the right is where they're going to. The areas on the left are exporting while the areas on the right are importing. And one of the things to think about here one of the things to note from this diagram is that you see that there are a multiplicity of transfers across the various BAs. It's not just two BAs transferring with each other. And also that there are some significant bands depending on how large of the transmission is available. Some of these may reflect greater transfers. This also allows us to depict the total transfer of each area, and that distribution across the many areas may be larger, reflecting that the WEIM market is actually having greater opportunity to find and maximize the permutations of the economic benefits that we referred to earlier. The figure on the upper right shows the total volume of imports and export transfers in the quarter among all the WEIM areas, with CAISO having that largest volume of exports and PowerX on the other end having the largest volume of imports. Next slide, please. This slide reflects that the WEIM transfers in Q3 tracked very closely the solar production that we see across the system. You can see the transfers become very dynamic as they optimize every 5 minutes. And in general, you can see a trend of certain patterns throughout the day. For example, the first figure illustrates the average transfer of each WEIM area within the hourly profile. A positive value represents a transfer import coming into a given area. And typically what you'll see is the CAISO area tends to export a significant volume of energy during the midday hours when the solar production in the BAAs is in abundance. And then you see the switch to become the ISO BA become an importer from various balancing authority areas where the counterparties are now, such as PowerX, are now taking on these transfers as imports into their area. In Q3, again, we saw that there was a significant increase in the volume of imports by PowerX. Again, you can see with the trends, the two diagrams, the PowerX diagrams, the CAISO, you can almost see that sort of offsetting effect of the solar production in the ISO area, and then PowerX taking that in and complementing that, both with it as exports and imports throughout the days. Next slide, please.
And remind us who CISO is.
CISO is actually CAISO. It's the California Independent System Operator, and in our systems, it's referred to as CISO, and sometimes in our diagrams it pops up as such. That's the acronym.
Okay.
Next slide.
And I think it's a technological issue, and I think that's used by some of the state agencies too, as to do with the software. So we're not creating new acronyms.
No, we're not creating new acronyms. It is a technological issue in terms of the number of letters you can insert. It's been that way for a long time in our systems. So this final slide shows us some of the price trends we have seen. Overall, we saw prices trending down throughout the quarter. And we started to see high prices in July as the summer conditions developed, and prices declining as milder summer conditions started to be observed in the later half of August and September. No surprises there. The illustration also shows, as a reference, the external bilateral power prices for some of the specific hubs that we think to be relevant. We show, for example, Mid-Sea hub to reflect the dynamics of the Northwest, and then the Palo Verde hub to reflect the dynamics in the Southwest. What we can say is overall, in general, that these bilateral prices track relatively higher than the WEIM prices. The prices for Parex, trended higher than the rest of the WEIM since Parex areas reached the maximum level of imports, as illustrated in the power slides. This was also the price increase into Parex also was reflecting the congestion in that area, driving what we refer to as price separation with the rest of the system. And this, of course, is reflected, as you can see, with the color trends, the purple one there in those slides. So that's the general price trends that we observed, and that concludes my prepared remarks. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Anita, you have your hand up?
I do. Anna, the presentation and the information that you're providing us continues to get more and more sophisticated and more peeling of the onion, if you will. And it's really enlightening. And I really appreciate the work that Guillermo and his team have done to just highlight where the flows are going, who's getting the benefits, and just seeing that down another level this time around was really nice. So thank you.
Thank you. I will take that back to the team. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Anita. Rob, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. And I too want to thank you for the presentation. This is great material, and I know that you're substituting for Guillermo at the last minute here, but terrific walkthrough of the information. You had comments on PowerX, and you know they had an incredible third quarter, but LADWP and NV Energy also had excellent third quarter performances, and I was just wondering if you were able to have any comments as to what they accomplished in the third quarter to have the substantially better and improved performance.
I think overall, one of the reasons why there's overall increased cost savings is the ability to access the across the various areas. I can't speak explicitly perhaps to Nevada and NV Energy and LA, but one of the trends we continue to see for all those areas is that in accessing the lower cost energy in the middle of the day from the CAISO footprint, and you could see this in some of the transfers diagrams that I shared with you earlier, right in the middle of the day when the cost is much lower, it allows them to overall shape the overall cost of serving their load throughout that day. Now, in some cases, not in some cases, as you know, as we get closer to the net peak, some of those opportunities go away when the sun goes down. That allows for greater savings, and there was definitely an increased amount of ISO exports happening during those hours.
Thank you.
And I don't know what their specific portfolio, causes their trades, but I know that is a trend that we see repeatedly.
Very good. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Mary, I think you had your hand up, but I'm not seeing it now. Did you get your...
I think he asked the same question. I just wanted to know more about PowerX. I'm also assuming they needed the power.
Well, yes, in a way, what we see is happening is that the way the market dynamics work and the pricing works on the WEIM, which is helpful, is right in the middle of the day when the prices are cheaper coming out of California, the CAISO BA area. You can see that the other parts of the system will tend to forego using their resources and then selling back into the market, as well as using the higher cost resources to serve their load within their areas. So that's the dynamic at play that results into that interaction between Pyrex and the rest of the market.
Any other comments or questions for Anna? Adrian, at this time, can we open up for public comment if there's any?
Absolutely. Again, to indicate you wish to speak during the public comment slide, click the raise hand icon at the center of the Zoom screen. You'll be placed in the queue. When unmuted, please state your name, organization, and comment. At this time, there are no comments or questions in the queue.
Thank you, Adrian. And thank you, Anna, but we're going to keep you on the podium here for a moment for agenda item 8, long awaited. And this is the briefing on policy initiatives. Anna, to introduce the topic.
Yes, thank you, Roger. And I have the pleasure today of introducing Becky Robinson, who's going to be providing to you the briefing on policy initiatives. Again, this is a briefing we normally provide to the governing body in their open meeting, but today we have the pleasure of sharing this with both bodies. So Becky Robinson, Principal Economist and Director of Market Strategy and Governance, will be providing you the briefing.
Thank you, Anna. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chair Leslie, and Chair Campbell, and members of the governing body and Board of Governors. It's my pleasure to give you an update today on our policy initiatives. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first up, just a brief update on the extended day-ahead market and day-ahead market enhancements. And Elliot touched on this a little bit in his CEO report. But just to recap, we in August, we filed those items as a package with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. There have been several rounds of comments and responses, and we are still hoping for a FERC decision, expecting a FERC decision by late December this year so that we can move forward with certainty on implementation there. Meanwhile, we are continuing internal implementation activities as it relates to EDAM, including continued engagement with prospective participants, and notably, as you know, Pacificor and the Balancing Authority of Northern California have indicated their intent to participate in EDAM. As it relates to the day-ahead market enhancements, we are still planning for and doing some internal preparation for those implementation working groups, and we expect those to begin in 2024. I believe we've talked about those before in terms of what we intend those to cover as it relates to market simulation and validation of sort of getting those day-ahead market enhancements rules in place and sort of giving stakeholders the opportunity to participate in those discussions in a robust way and ensure that there's a good understanding of those changes as we move forward. And then finally, this is all working towards a 2026 implementation date for both EDAM and DAME, and we are, which is going to be great, and it'll be here, I'm sure, sooner than before we know it. Next slide, please. So next up, we have transmission services and market scheduling priorities, otherwise known as the wheel-through items. And again, I think Elliot touched on this in his CEO report, but we were pleased to see an order from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission just over a week ago on October 30th, approving the tariff amendments that we had filed there. As a recap, that design provides for how we calculate available transfer capability, and the process for market participants to establish market scheduling priority for wheeling through the ISO transmission system. And then we are currently, so that all relates to kind of a phase 1 or track 1. So that provides for how you get wheel through priority on a monthly or daily basis. As it relates to longer term wheel through priority, we are currently working on the tariff development process for that, focused on a study and expansion process for, again, for that longer term basis wheel through priority. And we are targeting a FERC filing in January of 2024. And here we've got the decisional classification, which should be no surprise because you have already, the Board of Governors has already voted to approve this item, so it shouldn't really say proposed there, but just tracking that decisional classification for these items. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next up, we have the Western EIM resource efficiency evaluation enhancements. So not too many updates to report here since the last meetings of the governing body and Board of Governors. But just to recap, so on the assistance energy transfer functionality that we implemented just this summer, coming out of this RSEE efforts, we did see 5 balancing authorities elect to use that, which we were pleased to see, that this was something that BAAs were availing themselves of and found useful. And Anita, I see your hand went up. Happy to take your question.
Becky, if it's not secret stuff, can you share anything about the balancing authorities or the BAs that did utilize the energy transfer functionality, and like what was maybe just a high level, like what drove it?
I am able to, you mean in terms of just identifying who those BAs were that used it? So that information is in the summer performance reports. I have that pulled up, I believe here. The CAISO BAA was one BAA that used it in August. In July, we had Public Service New Mexico, Nevada Power, and I get the acronyms mixed up, but I believe Avangrid used it in July. And then there was one other entity that used it in August. Northwestern. As to what drove their decision to opt in, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can speak to that. You know, I don't know if you have more color you'd like to add to that, because it's an opt-in decision. So of course it's sort of up to each individual BAA whether or not they sort of see a benefit there and how they weigh the cost and benefit of potentially being exposed to the cost of the assistance energy transfer if they do fail the resource efficiency evaluation.
Becky, that pretty much answered what I needed, so I'm good. Go. Thank you so much.
Okay, of course. Thanks, Anita. So then just to recap, so on the RSEE phase 2 efforts that you all have already seen and approved, some of those were put in place for this past summer of 2023. Others are still kind of being rolled out in a staggered release, and in particular for summer of 2024, by that time, we'll have some additional enhancements in place from that RSEE effort to increase situational awareness regarding the expected delivery of exports from the ISO BAA, expected delivery of low priority exports from the ISO BAA to other BAAs through aligning the market results with E-tags. So we think that's a notable feature and looking forward to that functionality. And then finally, we do have an additional, we have it in the roadmap that we are proposing to kick off another policy or a new phase of policy initiative on RSE, would be a phase 3 item. And that would be, we would be kicking that off in 2024. The scope of that has still isn't really nailed down yet. It will be informed by some lessons learned from this summer. And that proposed decisional classification is expected to be joint authority. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we're moving into the policy initiatives that are in working group phases, a working group phase at the moment. The first of those is price formation enhancements, where we are continuing to have working group sessions on a biweekly basis on several topics: scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. And, up to now, these working groups have been focused on sort of identifying principles, problem statements, priorities, generating fresh perspectives, and so forth. Education in terms of existing ISO processes and level setting on those. But we've also started, particularly on fast start pricing, we had a session where we were really sort of digging into what should be the scope and questions to inform the analysis plan necessary to support data-driven policy development. So we're asking stakeholders, what they would like to see in terms of analysis from the ISO to inform that conversation on fast start pricing in terms of modeling and exercises that we can do to kind of try and anticipate what would be the market impacts of that kind of policy change. And I think the working groups going forward are expected to, maybe think a little bit, maybe shift a little bit more into thinking about potential solutions, as well as, continuing to peel the onion on some of these problem statements, because these are particularly on this item, and not just on this item, but these are pretty meaty issues, and we appreciate hearing stakeholder perspectives on them. Next slide, please. So next working group I wanted to highlight for you is on greenhouse gas coordination, which is focused on continuing to evaluate and evolve the ISO's GHG accounting design. So we are continuing to have these working groups really kind of, again, developing principles and problem statements, hearing from market participants, their observations on what they, on the current ISO GHG accounting design, as well as on the design for EDAM, and whether it goes far enough or not in terms of what it's intended to accomplish there to address leakage. So stakeholders have suggested a number of topics to focus on. So namely reviewing market operations, as well as both the EIM and EDAM GHG accounting design, so that there's a bit level setting and good understanding of what those mechanisms do today or are designed to do currently. And then, consideration of diverse state GHG policies, both in terms of cap and trade markets and having multiple states with those kind of markets, as well as having potentially state programs with GHG reduction policies that don't have an explicit price on carbon for the market to take into account. And then finally, emissions tracking, analysis, and accounting to support market participants. And this is particularly mindful of the fact that, the ISO has our own accounting mechanisms in terms of how we use the market constraints and so forth. That may differ from how the states do their accounting for from sort of an air regulation perspective. And so getting into some of that to help market participants in their as they interact with both us and the state agencies on this item. Next slide, please. Our third working group is on gas resource management, where some of the priorities that we've heard from stakeholders include ensuring accuracy and appropriate timing of advisory schedules prior to the day-ahead market runs, addressing potential reliability risks from gas system constraints, evaluating the reasonableness of our processes that we have in place today that are intended to allow market participants to accurately reflect their expectations of their costs. And so, again, so far the working groups have been focused on identifying and prioritizing problem statements, and I think they are in this working group shifting it a little bit to thinking about potential solutions to these problem statements, as well as potential analysis to inform how to move forward and how to address these. Next slide, please. then finally, our last working group that I wanted to touch on today, and that is on resource adequacy. So we have had, in October, we kicked off and had the first resource adequacy working group. We also had another one on November 1, and actually a workshop just this morning on slice of day. And Elliot touched on this item a little bit in his CEO report as well, but just, you know, we want to, this is an area where there has been a lot of attention and certainly a critical area to continue to explore. So the initial meeting focused on level setting and just sort of getting started with stakeholders and identifying some of the key objectives we have of this effort, which first is enhanced modeling. I think that's really critical and core and a place where the ISO can add value. That enhanced modeling should lead to more consistent, transparent, and timely information about the sufficiency of the RA fleet in the ISO, which, as you know, is covers multiple different RA programs and paradigms and regulatory authorities. Second, on our mind for objectives is an update or potential updates to our current requirements for RA capacity and program tools in light of evolving market and regulatory structures. So this has to do with our must offer requirements, bid insertion, resource performance and availability metrics, that sort of thing. And then third, among our objectives are addressing potential concerns about inequitable costs and cost allocation among market participants, where it seems like to maybe address those concerns, you might need to create a little bit of an apples to apples yardstick across different RA programs to be able to do a better job on that sort of on that cost allocation. So with that, I am happy to take any questions you all may have or attempt to answer them, and happy to be here presenting to you today.
Thanks, Becky. Rob, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Becky, great overview. Thank you. You cover a lot of territory. When EDAM was being rolled out, one of the changes was going to have the working groups involved, and that was to have a lot more participant and stakeholder input into the process and helping to shape it up front, rather than having the initiatives developed and then maybe shaped or have input at the end. And that was received very positively. One drawback was the heavy draw on resources and involvement. Here we've got a lot of working groups going on, and these are really meaty issues. Any one of them is significant, yet we've got the full slew in parallel. My question is, are you seeing the same level of intensity? Are you seeing the high level of engagement and the shaping by the participants, and which would make and keep that to be effective?
That is a great question, Rob. Thank you very much for the question. I can start, and Anna, if you have observations on this, I'd welcome those as well. I think that we are seeing good levels of participation in the working groups. I do think it's because the conversations are at a more formative stage. There's not necessarily a proposal to react to. I think we have kind of observed that since we take comments after pretty much every working group, right? But certainly we don't get comments from as many people as are listening to the working groups, right? Because putting thoughts on paper and running those up the chain of your company is it takes time and effort, and folks may not have definitive positions yet on these issues that they want to be put on the record for. I think we are, to your question, I think we are very mindful about making sure that we are very deliberately trying to foster that engagement, and so that, because to your point, the working groups are for stakeholders to have that venue to weigh in and to give their perspective and to really help shape the policy development process. And so, it's, we're having lots of internal conversations about how do we keep the working groups on, the right track? What is the right track? What are we seeing, and what might we like to see that we're not seeing? So I don't have a definitive answer to your question, but I think it's the right question, and I appreciate you raising it. And I, would welcome input from, from stakeholders as well, if they, have perspective on why we are or aren't getting, as much participation or comments or kind of how would we know if we were getting sort of the right level of engagement, I think is another question, because, I think we're happy to take comments after each working group meeting, but it's also, sort of up to stakeholders to figure out how do they want to weigh in and at what point, and whether that's written or whether that's more informal behind the scenes. Anna, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
A couple. I think you've covered a lot of what we've been discussing and thinking about, the level of participation and I think each working group, as Becky noted, is a little different. Not every working group is addressing the same level of detail, perhaps, or they may not be as evolved in their thinking. Some of the questions are really, and some of the working groups are more premature than others. And so it all depends, within each working group. But I wanted to highlight that we certainly are cognizant of the many demands on stakeholders, and we do take special consideration in how we schedule each and every one of these working group meetings. We have this, what we refer to like a bird's eye view of everything that's going on, both within the ISO and outside of the ISO. And doing so seems to at least have addressed some concerns about, the scheduling and the amount of activity people have to participate in. We'll continue to do that, and it's not always easy because, as you know, there are a lot of things going on, but that commitment remains, and we'll continue to do that. I think also what I wanted to add is that, this working group structure that we developed through EDAM and now we are trying to leverage with all the other initiatives is new to some of our stakeholders as well. And we've gotten some feedback with regards to the need to still maintain what we refer to as the iterative and documented approach to the ISO design process that we go through, where stakeholders can actually go back and look and see and read and evaluate closely what's being considered if they don't have the opportunity to sit in each and every meeting. So we are definitely trying to leverage, the strengths of both processes within the working group structure as well, and then provide clear indication to stakeholders when certain things are going to be happening so they can prepare and anticipate accordingly. But there is also this, need to have a little bit of less formality in the working group structure to really solicit that input from stakeholders and let ideas flow and give people the opportunity to really, brainstorm and come up with stuff that isn't as formal, and they're not going to be held to their comments. Some of that is really important to ferment the kind of stakeholder-driven and stakeholder participatory policy changes we're trying to achieve, so that we have that, ultimate buy-in to the end at the end of the day with the policy. So we'll be evolving and refining our efforts. I personally am very excited with the amount of participation I have seen and the feedback I've gotten from stakeholders with regards to our working group efforts. Joanne and I are continuing to partner. We, brainstorm on a continuous basis. So we're looking for more feedback and input, and we'll continue to evolve this so that we make it the best experience possible and in the development of policy.
Becky, Anna, thank you. I appreciate that, because I know it's tough on everybody. It takes a lot of internal resources to make this happen. It takes a lot of stakeholder involvement to make it happen. And if you ever see any divergence in that you would brief us, let us know, because I know that obviously we're driving the need and timeframes in here, and it can be tough trying to meet all of the various demands. So thank you, and I appreciate that that overview and feedback.
Roger, you're muted.
All right. You probably read my lips. I see you have your hand up.
I do.
So,
So I really want to commend the ISO for working through the working groups, which takes a little bit more time, but I think we'll get a lot better product by having the stakeholder feedback in the front end instead of starting with initial proposals. So I really do applaud the effort to do this. I'm hoping that as some of our updates go forward, that we'll actually see some of the a working group member possibly, or a RIF member, actually kind of co-present these updates where there's good stakeholder work going on in the working group. So I still would like, I love hearing the staff. I still would like to hear from our stakeholders. And I think, the gas initiative is a great example of that, where that was surfaced in the RIF. You guys have taken it on in a working group manner, and just getting that confirmation from them that, yep, we like it. And yes, it's moving forward. And yes, it's meeting our needs. So where you guys can maybe put that into the process, it's not on everything, but certainly selectively, I would really like to see that kind of joint or that co-presentation to the WEIM.
Thank you for that feedback. I think that's helpful. Yeah. Thanks, Roger.
Yes, hi, Becky. I apologize. I'm going to ask a really basic and very dumb question. I realize looking at this slide that I made some assumptions about what it means, and I have not looked at the ISO discussion paper. I had assumed that this was about, this is a working group to think about how we make more consistent looking at resource adequacy across the region. But then when I get to the key objectives, it looks at sufficiency of the RA fleet in the ISO, which I'm assuming is the California Balancing Authority RA fleet sufficiency. So I guess I've managed to confuse myself. I'm not clear on, is the goal of the working group to work and think about these issues and work towards consistency across the region? Or are we talking about the standards that people have to meet if and when they're bidding into or participating in EDAM? I apologize. I haven't read this paper, so I'm not clear from this slide exactly what the goal of the working group is.
I can provide, maybe I can provide, Becky, I can provide a little context on this. And it is a little bit confusing, Governor Shorey, so you may not be alone. So let me try to clarify a little bit. The resource adequacy enhancements, those effort that we're currently engaged in, and the working group structure is really focused on the resource adequacy program within the CAISO BAA.
Okay.
And it is looking at a number of elements, including increasing our capability and our ability to really provide better modeling and indication and transparency on what the reliability requirements are in the CAISO BAA. And of course, we're doing that collaboratively with the various agencies that we work with, as well as incorporating through the working group structure, the ability to get input from stakeholders and prioritize on the various initiatives and elements of this initiative. And that includes within that structure, the reason why we included, if you wish, a goal or a principle and the need to consider in the stakeholder process is how does the ISO RA program and all RA programs remain translatable and workable across the greater region. So there is a bit of an interaction there, because as you have programs such as the PUC's slice of day evolve over time, how does that remain translatable with the other resource adequacy programs that you see in the Western Interconnection? How does it remain translatable with the RA programs within the CAISO BAA that are not under the PUC jurisdiction? How do they compare to how the public utilities, the POUs, do planning, resource planning, and how does that all come into play within our BAA? So these are important questions of harmonization and translation that we need, not just for as we work closer to the regional market and getting ready for EDAM, but also for just existing in this very interdependent environment for purposes of ensuring there is adequate ability to and liquidity to be able to access the kind of resource adequacy we want across the various borders. So yes, we're looking at it from a program perspective, from the ISO perspective, but we're keeping in mind that what we design and how we communicate and what we put out there as a RA program needs to be harmonized and translatable with other RA programs so that market participants across the West have the ability to really do better business to capture the resources we need to serve load reliably.
Gotcha. Is the PUC involved in this working group then?
They are participating in the working group, and we also do maintain our coordination with the various agencies that are responsible. You remember, we have that three-party responsibility of an RA between the CEC with the long-term forecast and the PUC and then the ISO. Right. The CEC is also now taking on responsibilities for studying for the POUs, their reliability requirements. And so we're looking at this definitely in collaboration with the agencies.
Okay. But it does sound like then the principal purpose of this working group, so I've had it in my head a little differently, really is trying to focus on the California resource adequacy issues, but you're also trying to take a look at that you don't come out with something that wouldn't work or be inconsistent or be difficult to then think about the broader scope of EDAM and regional
exactly
adequacy. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Mary, you have a hand up?
It's just, you're making me think about it. So Anna, does this also show us what the volume, since our RA in California is set by California law, and the CPUC is the one who actually is responsible for allocating it, right? Compared to the other entities, the other VAs, right? Do they have the same, like when you look at the volume of energy we're supposed to produce in the next 10 years, right? If we're supposed to integrate 7 gigawatts of power onto the grid every year for the next 10 years, is anyone else trying to produce that volume of power? New clean energy?
So just as a clarifying, I guess context-wise, are you referring to everyone else outside of California?
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at RAs. You're telling me that you want to create this, the appreciation for each RA of each entity in each state, right? And then how RA impacts their RA. If you're just begging the question to me, is the same sort of goals even close? I mean, what the volumes that need to be produced in the next 10 years? Are you looking at a bigger picture?
I think the volumes in California are quite unique, but I think it's fair to say that the transformation, and there are transformations throughout the Western interconnection that are resulting in either certain types of resources no longer being present, and as well as electrifications across the various industries and day-to-day use. So I think there's electrification trends across the West that indicate, but in terms of number of resources, as you indicated, in terms of what they're interconnecting at any given time, I do think we stand to be unique. But the trends and the pressure to ensure that each balancing authority area throughout the West has a good handle on achieving the, what we refer to as resource adequacy is there, as evidenced by the fact that many of them have invested quite a bit in the Western Resource Adequacy Program in trying to provide a more level playing field, if you wish, in how they meet these requirements, and then also trying to provide a program that allows them to share in the diversification of load and resources across the Western interconnection. So we're not alone in looking at these questions.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you. That's what I was wondering.
Thank you, Mary. I don't see any more questions or comment or any more hands raised, I should say, from the board of the governing body. And Adrian, if we can go to the public comment and see if there is any.
Yes. To indicate you wish to speak during the public comment slide, click the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. You will be placed in the queue. When you unmute, please state your name, organization, and comment. And looks like we have no comments or questions.
It does. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Anna, governing body and board. That completes agenda item number 8. Agenda item 9 is a informational report, which is for the record on the agenda that these reports have been given to the governing body and the board as under the normal course. So unless there is any questions on that from the board or the governing body, which I will pause for a moment to see. No hands raised, so we can adjourn. Thank you, governors. Thank you, governing body.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Roger.
everybody.
Larry, Andy,
Bye,
thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
See y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using event services. You may now disconnect.